tells me I've gone live, but I'm not sure that's the case. So if you are out there and you want to learn a little bit about stress and emotions and how it affects us as beings, then you might want to jump onto this. So I'll give you a minute and see. If you are there, do shout out in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer any questions. How's that? Hold on a minute. All right. So Gemma G and her PhD. It's got such a ring to it, doesn't it? Wanted to jump on and share a wee bit about stress today, because Lordy knows everybody's got stress, right? And I actually had an experience the other day where somebody who was extremely stressed went to take the shit out on me, and I'm grateful for being in the space that I am, because then I was able to kind of put it back on them and say, you're kind of still angry about that, aren't you? And realizing that as humans, we tend to project our stuff onto other people, especially when we're in a state of fight and flight and fright. So I'll get ready to roll, shall I? Hold on a second. I don't even know if this is doing anything. Apparently so. Hold on. Let's just have a look at this. Make sure I've got my streaming going. Okay, so most inflammation starts from emotional trauma or mental trauma. Apart from the obvious physical traumas, the majority of stress is through repetitive emotional traumas or a significant amount of mental trauma. So it affects, how does it do this? It affects through the adrenal glands and through cortisol production. So everything is pretty much controlled by the adrenals. And when you have these high amounts of adrenaline and cortisol running through the system, they do have a short-term purpose. However, if that signaling pathway is upregulated and it stays that way, remember, everything is a pattern, everything is a vibration, and unless that's recalibrated, it'll just become the new way of being. Every state of mind that we have, positive or negative, is regulated by the adrenals and cortisol release. Adrenals affect every single emotion that you have, and that leads to various biochemistry processes and how we feel, how we think, and then how we think, well, that's our mind, but then eventually the body becomes the mind. And if you follow any of Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, he speaks about this all the time, in that we have an event that occurs and you have a feeling, right, in emotion, which is energy in motion. It has a particular biochemistry and electromagnetic signature to it, which is transmitted instantaneously to every single cell that you have in your body. And eventually, if you hang in that for a long enough time, then it becomes a mood. And if we stay in that, that becomes a characteristic of our personality. And then it's our personality driving our personal reality. See where the roundabout is? So first off is knowing that emotional stress is the most dangerous to the human body. It's the most stressful thing that the human body can experience. So I always say, they know this, they're aware of this. This is why they're doing what they're doing at the moment. Because if we can create enough division and enough stress, then you can control anybody pretty much. Not only that, but the impact on the physical body is you know, the most stressful, there's the word again, that we have. So important to know. So things like anxiety. Anxiety is just such a common way of being these days, and you've got to wonder why. And is it that we just have become more sensitive to our environments, more sensitive to the energies around us, and then also in this state of chronic stress? So our modern day world is full of so many expectations, you know, a rat race that people are running over and over and over throughout their day, and it leads to excess release of adrenaline and cortisol. Now, an excess of anything in the body is not good, and particularly adrenaline. If the adrenaline is not burned up or used up properly, it's actually very, very damaging to our nerve signals. And it's the nerve signals that control everything. So, and cortisol, well, let's go into what cortisol does to a system. So back to anxiety. So increased cortisol reaction in the body, it's actually an immune response as well. I've spoken about this on many occasions. Anxiety is that radar, it's your detector, it's your alarm system. The body's saying there's something not right here. I don't know what it is, but I know there's something not right. So now I'm going to ramp up my defense system. I'm going to become more upregulated, more hypervigilant, so that then I can, because I know there's a threat out there, although I can't find it, I can sense it. When actually it's an inner glitch happening, or your inner response to your external environment. So it's your alarm system, listen to it, instead of trying to suppress. So that's sort of, I'll come back to anxiety as we go, hopefully. I can't remember where this is going to take me, but it's worth listening to. So it's important to know it takes at least 10 years minimum for inflammation to really spread throughout the system and start breaking down muscle tissue. All right, so it takes that long for the body to figure out there's something wrong. So when we find ourselves with chronic dis-ease, it's not an overnight thing, anywhere from 5 to 10 years minimum, and you can track it back, and this is clear as day in the work that I do and the people that I work with, is you can back it back to a significant emotional trauma, generally in this lifetime, some in utero and some from past generational traumas coming through or encoded in through the DNA. So it takes a long time for the body to recognize that there's something wrong. And that might start out as pain, widespread pain, of course, or pain that moves around. Better in the morning, stiff and sore in the morning, but as you move around, things get better. That's quite typical of invisible inflammation. And I do put it in quotes because mainstream medical will not speak about it. They either are ignorant to it, they don't know that that's actually a thing, or they don't want to acknowledge it. So invisible inflammation is something that you can't see. That's why it's called invisible. You can't find on imaging, and you'll only know if you have it through specific blood work tests, which they actually don't do. You'd have to request and most likely pay for, or else somebody who is trained to detect invisible inflammation. And why would you want to know? Because inflammation is the basis, the beginning, the foundation of every illness and dis-ease and physical wear and tear that you have. So also, and this is well documented, there's plenty of research on that. There's also a lot of studies around showing that inflammation leads to depression also. So anxiety and depression, two of the things in our communities these days, where so many people are struggling. Children, early on as an intermediate or even younger than that, who are being medicated with antidepressants, wake up, people, there's something wrong here. And there is another way of dealing with anxiety and depression. So every time that somebody feels nervous, because I mean, who hasn't experienced this? I myself have had bouts with depression, and I never thought I had anxiety until I really started to understand more about it. It's not something I experience regularly now. However, in my adrenal exhaustion, I was definitely having episodes of anxiety. I wouldn't want to attend social events. I wouldn't want to go somewhere I've never been before, but I didn't know that that's what was driving my state of being at that moment in time, where, you know, I just completely lose my shit and not realizing that it was actually an anxiety response that I was having. So if you get that feeling, a lot of people get that nervousness in the solar plexus area. And of course, that's where the gut brain is. And the vagus nerve wanders all the way down, right from the limbic system. The vagus nerve is called the wandering nerve. And 80% of it is sensory input. So it's sending information from your internal organs right up to your brainstem, and it connects, you know, at the limbic system, and that is where all our experiences are stored. Right, so it's kind of like this little software scanning program. Remember, you are just a software scanning program. And so we'll feel this little radar going on in the solar plexus when we're feeling anxious. Remember, this is an incredible area for sensing. It's through the biofield. So, and it triggers off to the limbic system, and we do this kind of have we got a match? Have I experienced this before? Is this something familiar? Do I need to be concerned? Do I need to send off an alarm system? Do I need to start this process going? Shall I shut that down and start that up? You know what I mean? And in fact, what happens is when we get a stress response, every single cell in the body is sent an SOS, and it is told to put all creative processes on hold and and go into reactive mode. And so this is where the breakdown starts to occur. So, as I mentioned before, cortisol is actually good in the beginning. If we needed to run for our life, we'd be thankful and grateful for the cortisol. If we've had a physical injury or physical trauma happen, then it can put our body into a state of, you know, well, we'll go into a state of shock. But what I want to say is the cortisol will block a lot of signaling in. So there is a purpose for the release of the adrenaline and the cortisol. It's when it stays built up in the system, or for prolonged periods of time, that it will lead to severe destruction of your tissue. And this is where we will have been conditioned and indoctrinated to say, oh, but that's just old age, osteoarthritis. Well, you get that when you're this age, or rheumatoid arthritis, or whatever osteoporosis, whatever breakdown it is that's occurring, tends to be age-related in a lot of cases. However, when you back things back, if you acted upon the signs and the symptoms that were occurring when they were just little bells, you would be able to correct the signals, the key neurological signals, and therefore take a completely different trajectory. And there is a lot of evidence around that. So, so here we go again. So stress, cortisol release, piles of it, affects the HPA axis, the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, adrenal axis, and also, so of course the pituitary gland is in that. And the pituitary gland, it orchestrates all of the hormones and glands within the body. So it's quite key. And emotional trauma affects all of these main glands massively. So your hypothalamus is your little control center of the brain, of the system. And off of that, you've got a couple of other key glands. The pituitary gland is one involved in the fight, flight, fright response. And of course, then you have your pineal gland as well. You've got your thyroid gland. There's a lot of other glands in the body that are all necessary for carrying out all the processes in your system. So emotional trauma or repetitive emotional trauma or huge amounts of mental stress as well will impact these and put them on a go slow. Yeah, so a lot of these processes that should be carried out in the body are not going to be happening. So these structures, these glands are either going to be upregulated or downregulated. So as I mentioned earlier, the pituitary gland will tend to be put on a bit of a go slow. So the vibration of the pituitary gland itself will be significantly reduced. And of course, how things oscillate and vibrate is all about how information is transferred, energy is transferred, and the cells know what to do. So we want oscillation, we want the vibration of all the organs in the system, of all the important glands, of all of your electrical signals. You want them vibrating within their optimal bandwidth. And they do know what these are. And of course, this is the work that I do. Not all of it, but some of it. And trust me, I have seen it do things that our conventional world will tell you is impossible. So when you, in addition to getting these, think of vibrations, all right? Because anything that is anything is really just a specific orientation of waves and particles, long waves or what have you. So really when it comes down to it, at the most basic level of us as beings, we are vibrations. So if you have an area that's triggered to go much slower or upregulated, either or is going to cause a problem. If it's outside of the bandwidth, you're just getting static, right? It's like your radio station. So what will happen then is it creates incoherence within the system. So think of like electrical storms, or circuits that are misfiring, not firing, burning out, shall we say. And it then will lead to neuronal destruction. It might present physically as migraines, headaches, Horton disease, very dark thoughts. And there's so many different manifestations of when the body is what I call glitching, right? So a lot of the processes in the body, hormones and processes in the body, are actually regulated by these top structures in the brain. So you're talking about through the midbrain, the lower brain, the forebrain, through different parts of the hemispheres, the frontal lobe. I always joke with my family because my earliest brain injury Lordy, was when I was 5 months old. And so my frontal lobe would have been impacted on that injury. And then I know I had a couple of concussions. Well, I was a horse rider, so that's what you get, right? You're flying over jumps and literally flying over jumps. So I had the odd knock to the head. And so those top structures, they're important in terms of regulating us as beings. My dad always jokes that it doesn't think I would have been quite the same if I hadn't been dropped on my head as a baby. Sorry, not dropped on my head. I bounced myself off. But anyway, it's all worth a giggle. So hold on a second. Where's my notes going on here? So many hormones and processes are regulated by top structures, and as soon as the adrenals release adrenaline and cortisol, as I mentioned earlier, it responds as SOS to the cell. Boom, instantaneously. Remember, thoughts are electric. Nothing travels faster than thoughts. And every thought that you have, which is why we say be mindful to your thought, be mindful, to the audio that is playing in the background when you're not paying attention, because those thoughts are sending signals to every single cell in your body, but also, boom, out into the electric field, into the universe, into the web that you can't see, but trust me, exists. They measure it. They know it exists. And so there's SOS to all the cells, but it also, as I mentioned before, also that it puts many functions on hold. And there's a purpose to that. It's so that defense and cleanup can occur. When you have your alarm system going off, it's not a time to create. The pituitary gland signal to relax, because that's involved in a lot of our functions of creation. All right, it triggers off a lot of the follicle releasing hormones, a lot of things to do with us as beings in our reproductive and our creativity. So, and all of that will stay either upregulated or downregulated. Either or, doesn't matter. It's going to create chaos, and it'll stay that way until the signaling is restored. And this is where we get post-traumatic stress disorder. And I know there's a lot of people out there talking about that at the moment, and I am very fond of saying, because people like to say, well, oh yeah, well, what's your trauma been? It doesn't actually matter, because you can't compare traumas. You just can't. And it's like saying, well, somebody drowned in 30 centimeters of water, but somebody drowned in 30 meters of water. What's the difference? It's still the same, right? So whatever, some bodies are more resilient. Some people have come into this world already with a neurological system that's been quite dialed and wired, and others, we are who we are, really. So it's just understanding that these impacts from repetitive emotional traumas or repetitive mental stress can take years to really manifest physically. So hang in there if you're struggling, and reach out if you need any guidance, for sure. And I do feel passionate about that, because life is very, very different when you are on the other side of that, and when systems have been normalized, shall we say. The body is extremely black and white, and every situation that is uncomfortable, that's creating you stress or fear, will actually affect the rest of your system. And there's a lot of that people are being, how am I going to say? Triggered's not the word I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is, there's been such a inner battle with a lot of people globally, and that we're all at a point of trying to decide what's right, what's wrong. But at the end of the day, it actually comes down to your beliefs, your values, your truth, your light. And that if you are being somebody else to please somebody else, there's no more damaging stress to the system than inner conflict, for sure. So you are worth it. Stand in your own truth, as opposed to taking a knee to please someone else. Alrighty. So So as I was saying, every situation that's uncomfortable, stressful, fearful is going to affect the rest of your system, and the body will be attacked where it's weakest. 100%. 100%. And I want you to think about emotions as well, on how they have their own resonance also. So negative thoughts, negative feelings, like they have such a low vibration and a dense, heavy vibration that they literally impact specific areas of the body due to their sensitivity to different frequencies and vibrations. So, for example, anger and frustration is known to, and I see it all the time, it really be held in the liver. Gallbladder is very much about anger. When we're looking through fear, and grief is in the lungs generally, and fear tends to be driven and affecting around the kidneys as well. So that will weaken your system. It seriously will. Nothing is worth getting sick over. My bestie told me that one time from Sydney. So yeah, where am I at? Who's out there anyway? Let's see. And then I'll show you a little story in a minute about what I've seen recently, which is quite cool. So emotional stress, well, that affects us more than we can believe. And trauma affects the central nervous system and the oscillation of the neural circuit. So you are a light being. At the basis of it, we are a light body. And our experience, this is the trippy part, right? So the experience that you're having and how you can sense and you can touch and you can feel and smell, that is your internal system encoding that information and interpreting it just as that. So then you could question, is anything actually real? When you think of it on that perspective. So when if you're really wanting to optimize health and wellness, bring in abundance into your world, then it's certainly through raising your vibe. We say it all the time, and there are lots of different ways of doing it. Frequency therapy or frequency medicine, what I do, is fantastic at being able to lift a system up enough so that the fog disappears, the clarity is gone, the pain is not wandering through your system anymore, and you're able to actually restore and get on with functioning again. Better energy, so you feel better energy, so you make better decisions, right? So around and around it goes. So when you get let's talk about neural oscillation and stress. Well, when cells, let's say they're damaged, they could be damaged through physical trauma, they may be damaged simply through repetitive emotional traumas or a lot of mental stress as well. And when you impact the oscillation of the body or key signals in the body, key pathways in the body, because the body doesn't go, oh, I need this down here and speaks in that kind of language. It's all through coding. It's all a code. And so if that code is scrambled or not within its optimal bandwidth, or it's broken and the transmission is intermittent and then just stops, well, then you, at a very fundamental level, you're not going to have a cell vibrating at its optimal frequency. And so it can't transfer the information, it can't transfer the energy, it can't tell the next, can't tell the organelles in the cell what to do, let alone the cell next to it what's going on, because they all communicate, right? And so they'll get so stressed they'll just die off. And then what that creates is is apoptosis. So when the cell self-suicides, that's what it's called. And that's a toxic release. And then you've got what we call oxidative stress. So it means there's an increase in reactive oxygen species, basically these free radicals that go around, they're unstable molecules within the system, and they need to steal electrons from other bits and pieces to stabilize themselves. And then that's how they do the damage, is by stabilizing themselves. So if you can't, let me put it this way, if your level of reactive oxygen species gets too high and the oxidative stress is too high within the system, it's what we call a toxic load, then if the scales tip enough, then that's when you start getting breakdown. Think about rusting. Okay, so when you think about oxidative stress, you might think about putting something outside and it starts rusting. So oxidative stress does to the system. Oxidative stress, another way to look at it is think about the banana in your fruit bowl that's starting to go, getting those brown spots. So we often say it's the banana ripening. No, my friends, excuse me, that banana's that's oxidative stress. It's a slow rot. And that, my friends, is what happens to us. So we can stop this, and we can reverse this, and they know it. And this is where a lot of things aren't available for the very reason that they would work. Just a shout out, and I'm not going to talk about it in depth here, but there's, if you haven't heard, there are med beds that are in the making and in production. I'm not sure when they'll be released or if they ever will be released, because it works on bioresonance, and you would lie in this bed with a kind of a chamber, like an MRI, but a closed one, and one that's actually glass. You'll be able to see out and see in, so it's not like going into a tunnel kind of thing. And knowing what I know now through my quantum studies and through my PhD studies, we have what's called morphogenetic fields that run along the spine. And this is all through a lot of abstract geometry and things that you don't have to understand, but just know that they then actually dictate and govern and oversee the development of organs in terms of shapes, limbs, and all that kind of whatever it is. And so through the med beds, they can tap in through these morphogenetic fields, and apparently you'll be able to regrow anything and everything. So, and restore an entire system. So that's the future, my friends. Will we get there is the question. Hold on, wait. Look that one up. I'm hoping to get one. And I know the universe is going to bring it in. All right, so this oxidative stress is these free radicals, reactive oxygen species. Not all are bad, but the majority then actually end up doing a heap of damage to the system if it's not kept in check, and if we don't restore these pathways that are, sending off huge amounts of stress hormones through the system. And yeah, in terms of hierarchy and wellness, emotions top everything. So a little bit more on, let's have a look, a little bit more. I mean, Lord knows I can talk, right? Let's see what I can get through here. I might have to do a part 2. So more than 50% of depressed patients do not respond to medication. Yep. And in a lot of cases, in fact, make people worse. I know there are a percentage of people out there who have turned their life around through that. So this is not my purpose, is not to discredit that whatsoever. However, there is a huge placebo effect with medication, like massive. And same with surgical. One of the highest placebo effects is through surgical intervention. So, and I'm all about placebo anyway. I mean, placebo, all that tells me is that that's the body's ability. If we can believe in our self-healing and self-restoring, if we believe that we can get better, then, you know, that's more powerful than anything else whatsoever. Remember that if you want to actually change energy, and you want to, which it filters down through the finer layers, through the subatomic layers. That's where all the information lives, and that works its way down to the more crystallized form of matter, which of course is the physical body. So the power is out there for sure. Well, it's within and throughout, if you know what I mean. So here we go. And there's been multiple studies that support what I was just speaking about before, about depression as well. I can remember trying, man, I had a couple of incredibly stressful times in my life. And I think on 2 occasions I went on, what antidepressant was it, for a short period of time. And what I didn't like about it is it numbed my system. I just did not like it. Yeah, we're beings. We're here to feel. We're here to experience. I want to feel it all. Yeah, so anyhow, that was in another lifetime. But multiple studies have concluded that medications basically don't have the impact that we think that they do. And it certainly doesn't do anything for emotions. So as I said before, if you've got these impacted with and have a strong emotionally charged response to something, then if we stay in that long enough, and that becomes the mood, becomes the characteristic, becomes the personality, which then drives the personal reality. Excuse me, that loop is still going on in the background, even though you're suppressing and, you know, you're suppressing feelings, shall we say, but that wiring is still happening. That one that's set off adrenaline and cortisols into a spin, and it's just spinning around and around and around. So if you go even further, then there's a lot of clinical studies that show in clinically depressed patients, only 25% of clinically depressed patients have low neurotransmitters. And of course, that was an indoctrination and a teaching for such a long time that, oh, it's because your brain biochemistry is low or out of whack or whatever it is. Well, actually, that's not true. That's a half truth. And because they've also found in normal populations that you know, low neurotransmitters exist as well. So there's no correlation as there previously was thought. Now, gut problems will likely end up and link into depressive episodes, simply because a good 90%, 85–90% or what have you of our serotonin, our dopamine, is created in the gut. So if you've got issues, you're likely to have depressive episodes. Taking a pill is not going to help it fix your gut problems. Everything gut related is emotional related. So there we go. So I guess this is why I make a lot of my conversation when I'm meeting people is not so much about what do you do for work. I actually am really more interested in what makes their heart sing, what's their passion, how do they get charged? And if that's not in line with how they spend the majority of their day, then it might be time to consider, you know, what their existence here is, and to dig in and yeah, learn to, I suppose it's all about learning to accept that we are where we are at this moment in time, because this is exactly where we're meant to be, right? Tell myself, I do tell myself this daily. It's my mantra. Another way of looking at, if you want to link up the cortisol, stress, cortisol, depression, but since we're on this tangent at the moment, then look at how increased cortisol levels lead to increased amounts of free radicals. Increased amount of free radicals leads to increased amount of oxidative stress or widespread system invisible inflammation. All right. And so because free radicals steal energy, essentially, right, then if you reviewed the perspective on depression is generally a lack of energy, right? So here's this link again between stress, depression, and inflammation in the system. Don't take my word for it, go look it up. There's heaps of articles on there. And so because when you end up with increased oxidative stress, let me link it further for you. Increased oxidative stress is correlated with increased levels of inflammation in the body. Like I said, widespread systemic invisible inflammation. And anything, inflammation is acidic. And so what it does is it thickens or coagulates the blood. And so it affects your the blood circulation through the system. You end up likely with low amounts of red blood cells and anything that has to do with producing energy. So often people have been told they've got low iron. Why? It's not just about your diet. In fact, you know, through Joe Dispenza's work, through his neuroscience work, you know, he's really proving or putting forward a very good discussion around if you're in a stress state, it does not really matter how good your nutrition is. Of course, it helps. However, at a cell level, you know, the ability for the cell to even utilize those nutrients and get them into the cell so they can be used, that's compromised, because these stress hormones are so powerful that they end up replacing a lot of receptors on the cell membrane itself. And now when you replace that cell, because we do, you replace a new copy that is you know, even more wired and trained for this biochemistry, you know, 24-hour hit that we get addicted to our own biochemistry. So that's the hardest part of breaking the habit, or you know, making changes where a lot of people don't do it is because they become so addicted to their own biochemistry that they keep creating these situations in their life so that they keep experiencing the biochemistry. So who's ruling who, right? So there is, you know, if you look at, as I was saying before, if stress affects the amount of cortisol, cortisol affects the amount of oxidative stress creates inflammation, inflammation leads to coagulated blood, dirty blood, low red blood cell low red blood cell production as well. Then you're lacking in energy. The more energy you have, you actually can't get depressed. So it's another perspective on things. So if somewhere in your body has active invisible inflammation, so a site or an area that is continuing to drive an inflammatory process in the body. So remember, inflammation in the short term, it has a purpose and it's supposed to last for a few days. If it gets stuck into an overproduction, remember, anything in excess is poison to the system. If it gets put into that state, then you'll increase cortisol again and you'll start breaking the body down slowly, one day at a time. It takes years to really manifest as something more massive, insidious, shall we say. So we see this a lot in women, and I know that we are seeing it in our men a lot also, and I have another theory on that. However, what I'll talk about now is like it's common in women due to depletion of resources. So women, well, we give life, and to all my goddesses out there, you know, it's the highest power that we have. This creative force is it's insane, that we can create and build life. However, it does rid off or deplete us of our own resources, because everything goes to developing a baby, right? And then not only that, it goes towards the birthing, and that's a trauma in itself. And then there's the you know, the nourishment of that child, lack of sleep, etc., that goes with it as well. So you know, it's quite a vicious circle, and it can be a vicious circle where our relationships become strained. People are looking externally for answers, but nothing really changes. So you end up, and I experienced this myself also after a few pretty emotionally stressful events in my life. One being a teen mum, that one certainly knocked me for a long time, and you know, the emotional experience that came with that. But then not long after that, being held at gunpoint was also significantly stressful, which at the time, you know, it just was really surreal. So that one took a while to catch up with me. However, then, you know, after years, you think, you know that you're not quite right. So you go to the GP, they don't have any answers for you. They don't know how to look for invisible inflammation. They don't have the training in that area. And even if they do, you know, pharmaceuticals aren't going to be able to help. So there are ways. There's some, probably my favorite ways are, of course, frequency therapy, because that's what I've seen work more effectively than anything else. Water, your water intake. Oh, I can't talk enough about how important it is to consume a minimum of 3 liters of water a day. So this is based on the fact that there is a huge amount of fluid in the system, and a lot of that has to be replaced. It's kind of like as the immune system kicks in at nighttime, then the lymphatic system needs to flush out all the toxins and the debris and the whatever. And so you don't want to be dehydrated for that. It's like washing your dishes with half a sink of dirty water, right? You wouldn't do it. And the other reason to have high amounts of water intake is because you're an electrical being, and nothing conducts water. Nothing conducts electricity faster than water does, right? So yeah, heaps of water. You want to make sure that you are not dehydrated. If you can keep your cardiovascular system, so the blood system, the lymphatic system, and all of your organs relatively free of inflammation, you literally can't get sick. And they know this too. Was it the A2M protein I was speaking about not long ago? Yeah, they believe that's the one that has the ability to keep the human body free of inflammation. But if we do that, we won't have disease. So think of that $1 trillion business out there. Alrighty. Do I want to just finish off with this little part here? Yeah, probably. So cytokines are pro-inflammatory. There are some that are anti-inflammatory also, but generally that's kind of what is set into a bit of a spin when we have trauma, physical or emotional trauma as well. And when they are overproduced, they will break the body down, as anything that is overproduced will have a significant impact on the system. So the sooner, like in my work, I keep saying to people, I want to be so far upstream that I don't have to see what I see. I don't have to see things, for example, I currently have a patient who has what's called adenomyosis, and it's really where it's a fancy name for the wall of the uterus to be embedding into itself. It's kind of growing into itself. Now, anything to do with reproductive organs, whether you're male or female, anything to do with reproductive organs becoming injured, shall we say, because that's what it is, it's liver toxins leaking always. So why are liver toxins leaking? Look, that's a whole nother story. It's a whole other lecture. But if the liver toxins can't clear, then they generally just kind of, where does it go, right? Just sifts down, and it's like sediment. And it really impacts and is toxic to the delicate tissue, such as the uterus or the ovaries or what have you. Now, if you then couple that with having a couple of children and thinking about as the placenta is attached into the wall of the uterus, as that, I mean, childbirth is a trauma. It's an internal injury, trust me. And of course, not always, the body's got to get on with producing milk. It's got to get on with, just actually functioning after that. And so it's likely that there is a very old injury that continues to try to be healed and repaired. Then you go have another child, do some more damage, have another one, do some more damage. And so what I see and how I view this adenomyosis, which is, if you look at how the Western conventional approach to it is, it's painful menstrual cycles, irregular cycles, heavy bleeding. Now, I thought I understood heavy bleeding, but when they talk about heavy bleeding, it's like blood clots the size of an orange, heavy bleeding. Okay, so it's not right. It's not right at all. And so their approach will be take some pain medication, anti-inflammatory, whatever, try a couple of other things, and then you could go on to a contraceptive pill. Awesome, let's stress that liver some more, and throw the hormones off a little bit more as well, or in worst cases that they will do a hysterectomy. So really, when you look at what even is going on here, this is an internal injury that is trying to heal. So it's scabbing itself over again and again and again, and then that is shed. So why am I talking about this? Right. Okay. So then this is impacting every other process in the system as well. So through frequencies, what we've seen so far is that a new cycle, menstrual cycle, has occurred one that is normal, one of a normal flow, very little pain, if none at any, and normal in color as well. So that was within 2 weeks of disking. And through the frequency and being able to restore the signals, the body will restore to normal, because it's inefficient to be otherwise. So keep thinking about, I always say, ask the question why is something happening, and then track back, because we're really not that difficult. But the sooner that you can get onto things, as I say to people, when they first start to notice things aren't quite right, that's when you need to come and see someone like me, so that we don't have to kind of dig back from something that's more challenging. The body is a unit. Sooner we disk, the sooner we stop the breakdown and restore all of the negative processes in the system. And it's not uncommon, just as I finish off on the little topic of anxiety and depression, it's not uncommon to see that with chronic pain patients. And when somebody says, yeah, I've just got used to the pain, nobody gets used to the pain. You're kidding yourself. You're fooling yourself. You learn to cope with it, but it's certainly no way to be living. And then it kind of is just a spiral, right? So when acute inflammation is left unchecked, the circuits are continuing to spin, producing high amounts of cortisol and adrenaline. It's it might be a few years, but it'll be a matter of time that inflammation becomes chronic. And we know that inflammation is the beginning of all and every disease. And I think that's about where I'm going to finish it, because I could go on about that. And my other story, I guess I'll share now that I've gone off script, is I was out walking my dogs the other day, and my boys are pretty well behaved, I must admit, and off lead. So we were walking, doing a loop at the city, and it was on Sunday. There's nobody around, not when we were out anyway, and there was quite a lot of open space, and I was on the big cycle track that runs around the top of Auckland, and the cyclist flew by, like literally raced by, and then a few minutes later he must I don't think he was happy that I had my dogs off lead, who are well behaved, off lead, and weren't causing any problems. And he did this cycle around, pardon the pun, and started having a go at me, like literally started abusing me about me having my dogs off lead. So I politely asked him, I said, well, they're not causing any trouble, and as we all have a responsibility, I have a responsibility to make sure my dogs aren't causing trouble, and as a cyclist, you can't really be flying like a rate of knots through a shared pathway, and then turn around and start having a go at me. Well, that didn't go down very well. So I looked at him and I said, I guess you're pretty angry with some things in life, huh? and that's what saddens me, because that's the projection, as I speak about a lot, where we can kind of get an idea of what's happening in somebody's world by what are they projecting onto you. And I don't want to tell him that all that anger, like if this is how he's getting through his day, how that anger is impacting his liver. And as I said earlier, liver, when it's stressed, it's not going to be optimal functioning. It won't be clearing the toxic waste all that well. Where is that going? It will leak, and it will leak down, and it will damage and cause damage to delicate tissue. So one of the examples that happens through getting through life being pretty angry all the time. So hopefully, oh, which by the way, he then just raced off and yelled, get fucked at me, but not even nicely like that. He screamed at me. So I hope his day got better. And I just went about mine. So anyway, I am going to get back to my, what are we doing, Tick Tick? Oh, PhD. That's where I'm going to. So have a great night and happy winter solstice to all out there. If you have been feeling smashed off, whatever, and you can't put your finger on it, or if you are experiencing a lot of memories floating up to the surface of things that perhaps haven't come to mind for a long time, look, it's all part of what is going on out there in terms of energetically. So we are in winter solstice as well. The Schumann's resonance is back online. It has been for the last few days, but is absolutely sparking and hitting higher vibration to what it normally is, and does affect us as human beings. That's very well documented. It's not the woo, all right? The more we can learn about our existence here as human beings, the sooner humanity is going to rise, man, and we need it. And on another note, what else is going on up in this neck of the woods? Bit of collaboration going on with some wonderful goddesses. So shout out to me if you would like to know a little bit more about being involved in this heritage space and transforming it into a boutique spa hotel slash alternative therapy center. So yeah, look out for that. Oh, and join my newsletter, because I'm finally doing one. Catch you all now. We are out of here. Bye. Thanks, Jackie.